Embiid got a piece of it. Running the floor. Embiid stuffs it.
Harden for three. James Harden with his second triple.
Hello and welcome back, everybody. It is Friday afternoon, and Sean and I are feeling good today. As you guys remember, we did a podcast on Wednesday before Game 6. A little bit skeptical about how we would be feeling right now, but to say the least, we are very happy. Sean, how are you doing, brother?
Yeah, deep breaths all around.
Yeah.
It was always Sixers and 6, you know.
Yeah.
Great day in Philly sports yesterday. Got the Philly sweep. The Sixers wrapped it up. AJ Brown's an Eagle.
Wow, yeah.
Good things all around, I'll say. So happy with how the series ended. Glad to see the Sixers take care of business last night.
Yeah, it definitely felt nice to see not just a win, but they beat the shit out of them. And
Yeah.
they just beat the shit out of them up and down and up and down, especially starting in that third quarter. We're obviously going to talk a ton about that. But before we do, hop in and talk about BetUS, one of the leading sportsbook and casinos in the market. We're super happy to be growing with them. If you guys are interested, you can check out the link in our bio, whether you're on YouTube or whether you're on whatever podcast network you're using, whether that's Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can click that link. Use our code PICKSWAP at login to get your first bet risk-free up to $500. That's PICKSWAP at login. I bet Sixers in 5, so my bet didn't hit, but I can still be happy with that outcome. And the Sixers are now locked into a matchup with the Miami Heat starting on Monday. So let's go through and talk about last night specifically, and then we'll go over and do some full series takeaways. But just tell me how you felt about last night.
Yeah, it was great to see them keep the foot on the gas the whole time. I think the Sixers came out with something to prove. It was a close game throughout that. I'll say I did not feel like fully comfortable until the game was like well within reach. Like I'll say it wasn't until like 2 minutes to go till I was finally like, all right, deep breaths. This is actually over. Like there was still that lingering fear of like they got to keep putting it to them. They got to keep their foot on the gas throughout that whole game. But I was happy to see it. I was happy to see that they did. Everybody pretty much played awesome. The starters combined for 111 points, which is absolutely unreal. Embiid, a lot of physicality. I was happy to get him out of the game. The elbow by Siakam definitely, I think, did some damage, and more so than I think is being acknowledged right now. I think Max Embiid is pretty likely to be back for the second round. And I hate to see him get that. I hate to see that happen at all. A lot of like cheap stuff, a lot of physicality last night. It was a scrappy game. It was a scrappy series. I'm glad we're going in mostly healthy to round 2. But overall, I think Danny Green played a major role last night. Harden being dominant, Harden being aggressive made a major impact. 22 and 15 is a terrific line from him. Maxey did his thing. Shooting 12 3-pointers, I absolutely love. Just a lot of really solid takeaways last night. A lot of good things.
It felt like the first couple games in the series where the Sixers just asserted themselves, especially in the second half. But to go back to the first, all right, but I want to address my hat. I'm this is intentional. I'm wearing the Toronto hat today. I couldn't sport this. This is my favorite hat that I have, and I couldn't wear it until this series is over, so I'm proudly wearing it today. But to look back at that first half, James Harden, especially first quarter, 10 first quarter points, came out hot, came out aggressive, and looked to be the primary scoring option early in this game, which is something we've been imploring him to do, something you've heard from Embiid multiple times during the series, saying got to be aggressive. He's I want him to be himself. That dunk, man, we haven't seen a dunk like that from James Harden. I don't know the last time. Like, I'm talking about like beginning of last year type of dunk, like when he first got to the Nets. I haven't seen that since, but all night he was incredible. I think there like that was a really encouraging sign for me specifically with Harden. He does these roles so well. It's hard to balance sometimes, it seems like, but when he's aggressive as a scorer, he hit the one snatchback step back three kind of in the middle of that third quarter run was just got fouled on it. That one. I'm talking about, there was one before the one where he landed on whoever was it, OG Anunoby's foot. That's a flagrant foul, like by the text, like by the book. That's a foul, that's a flagrant one. The Kawhi rule, we all know it. Ridiculous. But anyway, Harden hitting that step back. I think it was on Thad Young, snatched it, took the step back, and walked back down the court yelling at something. It's like that's what we wanted from him. That's what we really have been asking for. And he was incredible last night. I was super hyped to see him step up when he was asked to. And you kind of pointed out some other guys. I want to talk about Joel's game though, because it was kind of quiet. And even like going into halftime, I was like, oh, he has 14. Like I thought he had like 7. Like I was a very quiet first half, and then hitting shots and laughing at the crowd on his way back towards the fourth quarter. What did you think of that Embiid game?
Yeah, I love the growth of Joel as a villain. I think
Yeah.
he loves it too. I mean, we saw him F-bombing the crowd. We saw him giving
Yeah.
the ears. He was fully embracing that. The Raptors fans really hate Joel Embiid, like really hate Joel Embiid. So
Yeah.
I think I've been like this series as a whole, I've been a little taken aback by just how strong that hatred is. And I think that's a sign of respect from an opposing crowd. If you're hated that much, that means you matter that much. You have that much real estate in their head, and you're that good of a basketball player to warrant that hatred. So I do think that's part of the evolution of Joel as a player. I was happy he didn't do anything stupid. There was a part of me that was very concerned late in that game when things were getting scrappy that there was going to be a lash out moment from Embiid. So I'm glad he kept his cool. The elbow to the face, like to bring it up again. He spoke post game that he was talking about. He said that he thought Siakam broke his face was the term he
Yeah.
used, and I do think there's going to be some medical attention to that in the coming week. As this game as a whole, he established himself much better on the boards in the second half. That was a huge deal. The offensive rebounds were the only thing keeping the Raptors in the first half. They had 10 in the first half. They ended with 15, which is still not great. Joel only had 3 rebounds at halftime. He ended with 10. So him diving in, making the adjustment there were a couple that he went up and got too, which is not always the case for Joel. A lot of times with his rebounding, he just kind of relies on being 7 feet tall and one of the biggest guys on the court, doesn't really box out, just kind of hopes the ball comes to him. But there were some moments last night where he really went up and got it. So I was very happy to see that. That made a real difference in this game. And I think everybody kind of clenched down on the boards in the second half. The Sixers ended up leading the rebound battle by the end of the game, and it was a pretty large margin that the Raptors held after the first half. So great adjustment there, and that was led by Joel. So I'm happy he kept focus, did his thing, kept his this team just kind of follows in his footsteps almost entirely. And I think him setting the tone early was a big deal too. He took a charge yesterday. Like, when's the last time you seen Joel Embiid take a charge? And I eat it up. That was one of those like that was pretty early on in the game where like the tone was still being set, and to kind of make that sort of statement as like we're laying it all on the line today, I thought was very cool.
Yeah, I think Tobias did a really good job on the boards in the second half as well. You know, in the series, I think he did a good job, but it was just like a clear lack of effort in that first half. Frustrating as hell, man, to watch them just like give up offensive rebound after offensive rebound and play great defense. And, you know, obviously guys like Chris Boucher are getting second chance opportunities. And, you know, I'm not going to say I was super, I know you mentioned you weren't really confident in that win until the final couple minutes.
Yeah.
I was confident that they were going to win going into halftime. I was like, they're going to win this game. You know, all they have to do is rebound and, you know, stop Chris Boucher, which in the grand scheme of things doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But I started talking shit early in the fourth. I loved it too. I'm okay with that. I kind of put it out there a little bit early, but I definitely got the feeling of like, you know, you got to keep pushing here. You got to, the Raptors went on like a little 6-0 run or something at some point, and I was like, oh no, like here we go, you know. But I think they did a really good job overall in this series. Doc Rivers included. Like I know there's a lot to talk about with him. There's still some lingering feelings and emotions, especially considering the way that he addressed the media again. You know, another thing that we didn't really talk about too much, you know, the 3-0 allegations. But like, I don't know. I think as a, you know, coaching staff and then down to the players, aside from obviously those first two, I'm sorry, not the first two, the games 4 and 5. I think they just did a really solid job in this series, making adjustments as well. Like you said last night, a big adjustment at halftime to go and get, you know, start rebounding, play stronger defense, closing out those, you know, defensive possessions, but then also going on that 17-0, like 23-2 run at the beginning of the third quarter. Like that's where championship teams are made or broken in that third quarter, especially in a series defining game as game 6 was. So like, I honestly felt like that was the most important 10-minute stretch of basketball that they've played this entire postseason.
Yeah. This was a strange series in terms of like, I think the Sixers are more talented than the Raptors by a pretty large margin. And we've gotten a lot of comments about people disagreeing with that, which I think is crazy too. I think like looking at OG, Siakam, and Scotty Barnes are the three guys I like can identify as like legitimately like very good starting caliber NBA players. Uh, Birch is like a borderline backup in my mind. I think it's crazy that he starts it all or plays it all for them. Gary Trent Jr., very fine role player, but he's in a role I think bigger than he's capable of filling. And he has his moments. They have a lot of guys that step up and have their moments, but as a whole, I just don't think the team is very talented. Like the people talking about like not breaking up Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam because of how good they are. It's like neither one of those guys I think can be one or twos on a championship team. So I think they're great players, all guys that play in their role, but every single one of these Raptors players are in a bigger role than I think they're capable of filling. Is my total opinion of that. But
Yeah.
to give them credit, like they do have a system that they play. They all work well. They click, and that's what made it so hard for the Sixers. The Raptors' strengths were full out the Sixers' weaknesses, and that was put on full display in this series. So I do think it was like a gut check win for the Sixers in this series. Like it feels like we're going to get back to playing like actual basketball moving forward. That it's
Yeah.
like this Miami Heat series is way more of a clean slate matchup in terms of like we're going to see who's the better basketball team, not just like who can muck it up more and do all that, because that was really what a lot of this series was. And that's not a disrespect to the Raptors because it was effective. They won 2 games, and frankly, they should not have been able to. And so a credit to them. I'm happy to see the Sixers respond in the way they did. It definitely felt like last night was a like locked in statement win, which I just need to see from this team sometimes.
Yeah.
I think this could absolutely be kind of a turning point in the series. Like as much as it sucked losing those 2 games, I think they need this team needs to be punched in the mouth every once in a while, and they took that and rolled with it in this one. So I was happy to see everything from the Sixers. I'm glad this is wrapped up and we can move on from Toronto for sure.
I'm so happy to be done with Toronto, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I want to go back a little bit to talk about, they were the perfect primer, right? Like Toronto,
Yeah,
and I think I mentioned this before this series, kind of like, last year the Sixers got the lollygag through round one, like they got to sleepwalk through round one and beat up on a terrible Wizards team, and then they got punched in the mouth too many times in round two. Like that energy, that ridiculous nonstop type of defense and game that Toronto plays, with 6'8" guys all around, the court running and, rotating and doing what they do was like the perfect way to get the Sixers kind of moving in this postseason. And I was really, I mean, I know you gave Toronto some credit there. I don't want to give Toronto credit. I don't like that team at all. I don't think Pascal Siakam is, I, I don't think about Pascal Siakam. I think that
yeah,
outside, he's a fine player. But the type of like respect that he's given around, like I don't care
totally
about
agree.
him.
Totally
I
agree.
don't care about him at all. I think he's uh not unskilled, but not nearly as skilled as most other guys that are number one options on. Like if all your move is turn your ass to somebody and push them around and stiff arm people just to get a terrible deep 2 off, I'm not impressed
Yeah,
by that. And
and
I like Fred VanVleet.
that's all Siakam shots are like deep contested twos too. Like he's like he's very Tobias Harris in my mind in terms of the
Yeah.
over dribbling, the taking bad shots, and not the Toby we've seen this series, thankfully.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the bad side of Toby, I see a lot of that in Siakam. And I one of the things that like blew me away in the series. This was after Game 1 when the Sixers had like the convincing victory. Nick Nurse was talking about one of the adjustments is he's like, I want to get Pascal Siakam in around the 25 shot attempt per game range, and I'm just like, are we talking about like the same
The
Pascal
same
Siakam?
guy.
Like to act like this guy's like the second coming of KD is crazy to me because like once again, I don't think he can be a number 1 or number 2 option on a championship team, and I think 3 is even generous. Like he's a guy that like has his game, has his style, but I think vastly overrated in the Toronto system.
Yeah, and I think he's a guy that, will have those nights. Like you'll see him pop up on your Twitter feed. It's like, oh, Siakam had 43 points. It's because when those shots are falling and he gets hot on a night, like those are the type of guys that don't do it for me.
Yeah,
And maybe I'm, under evaluating him because of this series and how much I didn't like that team. I wrote about it last night. What an embarrassing ass franchise they are. I was blown away by the way that they carried themselves through this series, the way that their fans behaved. Like I understand Philadelphia is abrasive and, they're not a very welcoming fan base. Obviously we're a part of it, so we understand. But like Toronto, man, they were terrible. They were god awful, like from the jump, just
mhm.
terrible. And I get booing Embiid. All right, that's fine. But even like down to their reporters and down to the people that are like professionals within and around their organization, just like very childish people, which was surprising to me. I felt like that they were better than that. I don't know why, but I'm happy it's over with. Like you said, I'm very happy to move on from that. But yeah, like we were saying it from the start, they're not a better team than the Sixers. They never were. They out hustled them for a few games. That happens. Should it have happened? Probably not. Was it frustrating? Absolutely, but it's the way that it goes sometimes. And I think I'm excited for this Miami Heat series.
Yeah, I was happy to see Embiid hit that airplane too after all
Me
that.
too.
That felt great. And also like the struggles in this series, the dropping those 2 games ruined so much just like Sixers fans being able to be full dickheads. Like
Yeah.
when we think
Yeah.
about like the Jokic sucking ass in the playoffs and the Nuggets looking bad, the Nets getting swept, like everything
Yep.
else in like the NBA world was like pro Sixers favor. And to be like
Mhm.
struggling with this series definitely sucks. So it definitely is like a sigh of relief, like we got through and we can just kind of enjoy it. When you look at it, just looking back now, that was pretty much like an ideal NBA playoff first round from a Sixers
Yeah.
perspective around the league. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
was gonna say. Sorry, go ahead.
so I was thrilled with that. Especially the Nets being swept and the Jokic stuff is incredibly thrilling.
Yeah, I think that was a lot of us kind of like kept that in our back pockets because like normally I would have been loud about that. Normally I would have had a lot. I mean, to be honest, like the Nets series, I kind of just didn't care about that. Like it was incredible to see them get swept. Um, but like the jokes write themselves. It's already out there.
Yeah,
I like that was something that I was just kind of happy to watch happen, rather than like take part in it.
yeah,
And Jokic, I mean, another thing, I don't really think about Jokic anymore, man. They're gone, so like I don't have a problem. He can get out of here. I'm very excited to keep this moving. I don't know. You want to talk about this? Like, what else do you want to talk about this series? Because I'm like almost looking too far ahead. Start talking
yeah.
about Miami, but we can go back. I mean, you want to talk about Tobias in this series?
Yeah, talk a little Tobias, and we can dive into Miami pretty soon too. Just Tobias in general, massive credit this year.
Yeah,
Massive credit for the second half of your year and to open up the playoffs. And this is like it seems like it's an easy task, but it is really not for a guy to totally like transform what he is as a player to fit a system. And that's exactly what
yeah,
Tobias Harris has done. To just simplify his game to be able to be a catch and shoot guy, get to his spots, played terrific defense throughout this whole series. I mean, he strapped up Siakam for a good portion of that series, which is impressive. And if Tobias can continue being like a defensive glove on this team, that changes a lot for this Sixers franchise, especially just considering the limitations that they have with wing players. The Matisse, as much as like obviously the Toronto thing's over and he'll be eligible to play everywhere else, I still don't think he's capable of playing like minutes in this postseason. I think his offensive liabilities are that glaring that I have no confidence putting him in. We saw some Furkan minutes last night, which I was happy and surprised to see. Not a lot. He played 5, so it's something. Got a bucket, I believe. No,
Jaden Springer playoff
yeah,
bucket. How about
Jaden
2 of
Springer
them?
4 points. Yeah, he looked good. Little burst from him. Had a couple like who's this guy's in the room I was
I was
watching.
laughing.
Yeah, so it was cool to see the scrubs in at the end. But yeah, a massive credit to Toby overall and on the boards like you mentioned earlier. 11 rebounds last night. He had 12 the other game. Like that's awesome from Tobias. You can't ask for more than
Yeah.
that. So he did everything we could have hoped for from him in this series.
Yeah, I mean, we've spent so much of this year, last year and this year, kind of being like he might be on his way out. Um, but man, I think he deserves a ton of credit for
Yeah,
this series and what he did for this team. And it's gonna go understated. Not many people outside of Sixers fans, and I'm happy that Doc went out of his way to say like he was like one of the MVPs of this series because he absolutely was. He was solid. He was consistent. He did the dirty work. Like I know we're talking about a max guy. I know we're talking about a guy that we wish was putting up 25 a night, but at this point, it's not necessary. And for him right now, to put his pride aside, to put away whatever ego, would come with that. Obviously, Tobias is not an ego guy. Um, Fantastic stand up dude as is, but to be able to kind of you know, shrink your role on this team and decide to just lock in on what you can do, and being, defense doesn't get credit in this league, and rebounding and, changing the way what you do on offense, it doesn't get enough credit. And he was able to do that at a really high level. And then offensively, he was fantastic. Like I haven't been this confident in a Tobias jump shot since he first got here. and he's doing it like really well. I was, just very happy to see. And it's only in spots too. Like you don't like we kind of alluded to it earlier, the over dribbling and the indecisiveness. And, he's been better on the fast break. He's getting downhill more often. He's getting to the rim, at a better pace. And he's also shooting the three really well, and taking advantage of mismatches when they come. So I was just, I wanted to shout him out because I think he deserved a lot of credit for what he did in this series. And I think his role is going to be equally as important next round, defensively as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, it feels disrespectful to like throw him in like the complimentary player category, but that's where he's
Yeah.
like the best fit on this team, and he's
Yeah.
very impactful in that. And similar to like Danny Green, I don't know what it is. It feels like there's a guy on every team that their shots just feel like so much more massive than they actually are. Like every single shot that Danny Green shoots, it feels like it's
Yeah.
just like a momentum changer. Like it's either
Yeah.
giving the Sixers life or just like a gut punch, which it's
Yeah.
very bizarre, but it just feels like every single three-pointer he throws up has that much of an impact. But Danny Green's another guy who did a very good job this series. He saw his three-point attempts increase from he shot 4.4 during the season to 7.7 in this playoff series, and some of that's obviously scheme with the Raptors doubling and the kickouts are what was open, but a lot of that I think is Danny Green getting back to his full self. That's similar to the number that we saw all throughout the regular season and postseason last year, and a good Danny Green run through this playoff is super crucial to this team. So I thought he did a very good job as well this series. Just kind of what I mentioned about Matisse, how I don't think he's a playable guy except for very short doses in this playoffs. Danny Green's going to be looked at to play some major minutes. I mean, he shouldered 29 last night. He's broke 30 a couple times this series. That's what we're going to need out of Danny Green. And if he has like this playoff run in him, if he's got that in his legs, like that's all we're asking
Yeah.
for throughout this whole season. So I also was very pleased with Danny Green.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree with you with it either feels like the best thing or the worst thing in the world when Danny shoots.
Yeah.
Dude, he hit a step back last night. It's like
Yeah.
it's one that just makes you laugh because like there's no way he should even be shooting that, let alone making it. And then he drills it. He was 4 or 5 in the first half from 3, which is just incredible. And yeah, like you said, Danny's going to be important. Danny is a guy that I was out on for a while. Maybe that was naive of me to believe that you definitely stood true with Danny. So respect to you for that. But Danny's gonna be important in the next round too. Like you think about the matchups and what Miami did all during this season and last season against Philadelphia. That is play a zone, make life difficult for Embiid, and having a guy like DG that can consistently and confidently stand in that corner and just catch wide open catch and shoot jumpers like Matisse literally can't do that. Like, actually, just cannot do that. So, obviously, Danny Green is going to be an important piece. I'm interested to see what Niang's role is come next series because he was kind of in and out. He was kind of but he hit 2 last night. And there's nothing like him yelling at the opposing bench after he hits a three. It just makes everything feel better. So he's going to be an interesting guy. And then obviously Paul Reed. Like, do you think that they stick with Paul Reed, or do you think they go back to DJ here? Because I think Paul Reed, especially last night, played himself into this role again next series.
Yeah, I think Paul Reed's earned it. I'm also a guy that would love to see some minutes of Paul Reed next to Joel. I
Yeah.
think like having a guy that just can do the dirty work on the glass, boxing out, just making life hard for opposing defenses, where Joel can just be kind of like the cleanup, like come across block shots, but not have to box out as much, and just free Joel up to do like whatever he wants and have Paul Reed do all the dirty work. I think would be awesome. I don't feel as if Doc like trusts him pretty much whatsoever. I wouldn't be shocked if DeAndre Jordan is in the series, but like Paul Reed has done everything possible to continue earning his minutes. He not that he was perfect in this series by any means, but he still left it all out there. He gave complete effort, and he had some real positive flashes in terms of what he did. The rebounding was great. I would say this series from Paul Reed is probably the most productive backup center minutes that we've had in like Embiid's entire career, which is a massive credit to him. And a lot of it is just literally like the raw effort and just leaving it all out there, fighting for every rebound. And like that's important. And for a guy that you're playing like under 10 minutes a game, like that's kind of what I expect from you. I expect you to give me everything you got for those 10. I don't feel like we're going to get that with DeAndre Jordan. I don't know. Maybe the playoffs is a different beast and he wakes up, but that certainly was not the case in the regular season. So I personally think they should continue ride or die with Paul Reed, but I'm less confident that actually happens.
Yeah, I'm worried about what Miami does offensively, and they're just gonna, they're gonna hunt down DeAndre Jordan and pick and rolls, force him to play a perimeter defense, trying to chase any one of those Miami shooters around, or he's just not physically capable, so he would probably just watch them shoot. So I don't know. I think Paul Reed, I don't know, maybe he's not the answer necessarily right now, but he's definitely the best option. And like, again, I think, we've obviously talked about how it would have helped for him to have figured it out during the season had he had the opportunity. But it looks like he's figuring it. Like, it looks like last night, it looked like he pieced it together a little bit more. Like every game, it seems like a little bit more. He had a couple down games during this series, but like he's only getting, you know, 10, 12 minutes, whatever it is. So it's kind of hard to put the pieces together when you're on the floor for, just a handful of minutes. And the pick and roll with James Harden is looking better. He had a nice and one last night. Yeah, I think energy wise, physically, like I guess to be fair, like Dwayne Dedmon is their backup center. So like for Miami, I don't even know. Maybe it's a, kind of a meaningless point to go too deep into right now because it's a backup center in this series and there's a lot more to it. But if you want to, let's talk about that series. Let's go into it. Finally here, I think let's cut it. It's 25 minutes into this podcast. We are officially done talking about the Raptors. We can all thank God for that. But we'll move on to Miami. The Sixers do have to travel there on Monday evening to take on the Heat, who are now the number one seed in the East. How are you feeling? Just overall, how are you feeling about this series?
Pretty good. I'll say, like, kind of what I said earlier, I'm ready to be getting back to real basketball. I feel like the Heat match up with the Sixers in a much cleaner way and not just kind of like the strengths and weaknesses did not overlap in the favor with the Raptors. This is kind of a much more even series in terms of that. Is each team has their holes, each team has their positives. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what the Heat do defensively. They did an absolutely masterful job on Trae Young in the Hawks series. They got Trae Young thrown off his game in a way that I didn't even think was like possible, to the point where there was a play in the final game where he had a wide open three in the corner and hit the side of the backboard. And it was just like I did not think like that guy was capable of being that rattled, but they did a terrific job throwing bodies at him, preventing the pick and roll, doing a lot of stuff. I think they're going to do some similar stuff with Harden in terms of blitzing and blowing it up deep and not letting him get into like the sets and the point of view that he likes to establish his offense from. The downfall, I think, of this team is in many ways Bam Adebayo. And I don't mean that as a slight toward Bam. I just think the Heat think so highly of him that they're going to leave Joel one-on-one with him a lot more than Joel's used to be being left one-on-one. And that's still a matchup that Embiid is going to win pretty much every single time. And it always blows my mind looking at Embiid next to guys that are like legitimate centers around the league and just looking massively bigger than him. Like Bam's a guy that I think this is going to be put on full display of. This is a guy who is legitimately probably like a top 8 center for sure, top 6 to 8 center for sure. And Embiid still is just like I think is that much more, even with the broken face, the torn ligament in his thumb. Like I still have a ton of faith in Embiid. So I think this is going to be a good series for Embiid to be able to be the guy, but I think Miami's going to throw a lot at us as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel pretty good about it. Not like, again, I'm not. Somebody asked me the other day if I thought, if I was confident that the Sixers will win the championship. And I was like, all right, I'm not confident that that's going to happen. I'm confident that they're talented enough to do that. Same thing with this series. I think I'm going into it saying, I'm not confident that, necessarily they're going to win this series. I'm not saying, okay, I'm totally sure they're better than this team, whatever, but they have the pieces to do it. And I think when you look at what Miami did to kind of dissect the offense of Philadelphia, like that zone put them in hell because they didn't have a facilitator. Like, and they, especially even when Simmons was here, like he's not a threat. He wasn't a threat outside of the paint. So, what Harden does is just so much different and such a higher level of facilitation that zone, I think, could get picked apart, with his, the way that he's been able to dissect defenses over the last couple weeks. I don't know, though. It's going to be interesting. Like you said, I think Embiid holds a pretty strong advantage over Adebayo. And I'm sure he remembers being ranked below him in the whatever it was, ESPN's top 50 players or whatever it was in the NBA. I forget which exactly it was, but I'm sure he remembers that. Master Embiid, the last time we saw Master Embiid was when the Sixers beat the Heat in 5 a couple years ago in the playoffs. So I don't know. I'm excited for it just because this is the first time we'll see Miami at full strength. The Sixers haven't been, they haven't had Harden and Embiid on the floor against them since that trade or all season, considering there was no, player playing in Harden's spot. So I think it's kind of like you said, a clean slate, but in a few different ways. A clean slate because there's no history yet between these two rosters. And also when you think about it, Kyle Lowry's missed some time. Jimmy Butler's been, not fully healthy. And, I think they have a chance to really beat them. And, they have some weaknesses. Miami does. Like, I think a lot of people are forgetting the fact that Miami has some pretty not significant glaring weaknesses, but they have ones that can be picked out. And I'm sure that the Sixers will do their best to point those out.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, Tyler here is a guy that I kind of have circled in terms of he's a guy just overplayed in his role and has way more responsibility than I think he probably should on a real contending team. And the matchups, I'm curious to see exactly what we
Yeah.
do. I mean, Hero is still a very solid player, but like for him to be their second leading scorer on the team and Jimmy Butler, who obviously we know plenty about Jimmy Butler, but I don't think he's capable of being like the guy that he was in round one in terms of he was terrific in shooting the ball, pulling up, hitting threes, scoring 30 plus points. That's just not this guy shot literally like 18% from three on the regular season.
Yeah.
And it's like I don't and he's capable of getting a run, getting a stretch. He can do it. Obviously, we're seeing him do it, but like that doesn't worry me for an entire series long thing. And I think it's gonna be cool to see Embiid, this version of Joel Embiid against Jimmy Butler on the opposing sides. Obviously, with all the history there, I think that will be very fun. It's gonna be another scrappy series, another fight for this one. But I do like how we match up much better. I mean, the Heat run a lot of sets like Duncan Robinson for three, a lot of clean sets for three that there's gonna be chasing around screens. So I guess in that aspect, Matisse will probably come into play. I think Matisse should sit on the bench like a changeup in this, in terms of like whenever there just needs to be like a cool guy down, throw him in for 5 minutes. But outside of that, that's kind of all I really want seeing with that. But that's definitely something to have kind of in the playbook. And I mean, like Victor Oladipo, I think worries me more than I think a lot of people. And that's like a weird X Factor kind of storyline in terms of he's had such a just bizarre career trajectory with that. But this is a guy that I think like is a guy, the type of player the Sixers miss in terms of coming in off the bench, making an immediate impact, just being able to get a bucket. So I'm curious what his role is going to look like in this series as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, I like to point out pretty quick that like Atlanta was really bad. Atlanta was not to diminish what Miami did. They beat up on them and they did a really good job on Trae Young, but like and I guess it's hard to say that considering what happened last postseason. But
yeah, hurts.
This team, I mean, but this Atlanta team was worse than they were last year, like a significant margin, and they didn't have Clint Capella. So like, there's a lot that goes into that. Obviously you said like Tyler Hero. I'm sleeping. I don't know if that's okay for me to say. Maybe that'll come back to bite me, but for right now, I'm sleeping. I don't mind him coming in. He is, target number one defensively. When the Sixers are on offense, like, they're gonna switch everyone and anyone onto Tyler Hero. They want Harden attacking him. They want Maxey attacking him. They want Tobias attacking him. Hell, they might want Danny Green attacking him. The way that he defends, and Duncan Robinson the same way. Duncan Robinson is not a very good defender. Obviously, Miami is a strong, sound defensive team. They're similar in the ways, like we've said, energy wise, scrappy wise. They're going to give the Sixers a hard time, and I think that was why I was happy that the Sixers played Toronto in that first series, because they kind of got ready for that. They kind of got an idea of what it's going to be like. Miami is obviously a more talented team than Toronto is, and they have more guys that can do more. But like, they have to avoid the Max Strus games. They have to avoid those type of weird performances from their fifth or sixth or seventh guy off the bench. So, but aside from that, I'm excited the way this matches up. I don't know what the Sixers do defensively. Kind of what you said. They played a lot of zone against Toronto, and I wonder if they go back to that.
Yeah, I thought that was a nice adjustment by Doc, and that's something he hasn't done a ton through the regular season, very much in small doses. A thing that I thought was cool about it too is that it felt like during the regular season when Doc tried to give zone, like the other team would hit like 2 or 3 jumpers and he would just
Yeah.
kind of scrap it. Like I felt like he had a longer leash with it throughout these playoffs, and Toronto's a prime example of a team that's like zone's a good shout against. So credit to him for that. But I have no issue with doing this with Miami too. I will say I think the zone did contribute to some of the rebounding issues, but
Yeah.
you got to pick your poison a little bit. So I'm still not mad at it by any extent. But I would love to see that continue in that series. It's interesting. Like I really don't have a clean matchup, so I think zone kind of makes a lot of sense. I don't really know who we want Harden on, and I maybe even PJ Tucker might be my shout for
Yeah.
that. And like I don't think that's a horrible matchup for
I
him.
don't
And
think so either.
yeah, so we'll see. Maxey, obviously, he's going to have a size disadvantage between just about everybody here, but he's capable of being able to blow by guys, which that needs to be utilized. The thing that I was super excited about in the Game 6 win was it felt like Maxey stepping up again and not being shy about having his role in his offense. And the deeper we get into the playoffs, the more crucial that is in terms of just go get yours. Like it's very difficult considering, like, again, this guy's 21 years old. He's still
Yeah.
very early in his career growth and what he's going to be. But it's been talked up of how good you are. We believe you're this good. Just continue to be that guy. Just be you. Play like the basketball player you're capable of. And I think the more Maxey continues to understand that, the better the results will be for the Sixers. So that's going to be put to the test in this Miami series. The Spoelstra is going to definitely have some interesting looks cooked up and adjustments cooked up against this Sixers team. So I think each game is going to be a very much different look in terms of, like, I was surprised in the Toronto series how it took Nick Nurse like to go down. Really 2-0. There were adjustments in game 3, but 3-0 is when things like really kicked into them getting like a whole new game plan. Miami, it's not going to work like that in terms of Spoelstra is going to have in-game adjustments more. He's going to have, like, if Embiid kills Bam in the game 1, which is kind of my hope for what happens, like I guarantee that'll be scrapped and they'll be bringing help game 2. So there will be much more on your toes thinking. Doc Rivers, I've been, for the most part, extremely happy with what he's coached to start the season or to start the playoffs. So I hope that continues in round 2 too.
Yeah, it'll be definitely an interesting series. There's a lot of you know, I wouldn't say necessarily bad blood. I don't know, maybe a little bit. For me, definitely. I hate the Heat. I
Yeah.
got a lot of personal vendettas against them. But like you said, I think Tobias stepping up as a defender will help. I wouldn't be surprised if he's the primary on Butler.
Yeah.
Um,
Which would be cool.
which would be cool. Which would be cool. And an interesting wrinkle to this. You talk about Danny Green. He might get a shot. Who knows? But I think that the difference in the weakness and the strengths for this series is a lot different than last series. And when you look at it, I think that you kind of said the matchup is a lot better. And I think I'm hoping, like, this is one that, like, you're not gonna mind if this game goes, or this series goes 6 or 7, because, like, last series we were kind of pissed, right? You're up 3-0 and then you have to play 3 more games after that. Like, that kind of pisses you off, and after game 5 you're just, like, pissed. But if the Sixers are playing in a game 6 against this Miami Heat team, like, you're kind of just like, okay, stay locked in, keep pushing, keep fighting in this series. And I think I'm looking at this as, that first series is kind of the weight off the shoulders. Now is kind of just, like Danny Green said, it's time to nut up and get moving in this series, because I think it's going to be another test. It's obviously a test, but they're kind of fighting off these narratives of, Doc, obviously, and James Harden, actually Embiid as well. Like, all 3 of these guys kind of have a pretty poor reputation in the postseason and when what they have or have not accomplished. And this is a really, really good opportunity, I think, considering the other series opposite of this series is probably going to go deep, and it is probably going to be a battle as well. I think the 4 best teams are left in the Eastern Conference right now. I think it's shaped out differently than last year. So I'm just very excited. And as obviously that's going to change at some point. I'm going to be nervous. I'm going to be anxious, right before tip off game 1. But I think these first 2 games, especially in Miami, you're looking to get one out of these first 2 and then come back to the crib tied, and you're feeling pretty good. So I'm very I'm antsy, but I'm ready to go for this series.
Yeah, yeah. No, there's been some great basketball already these playoffs. We're getting in the thick of it, and it's going to continue getting more and more fun, I feel like. So I do think both these battles in the East are pretty heavyweight matchups that are going to go deep in the series. The Sixers need to show up. They need to be the team that they're capable of being. Once again, this Miami team is not one you can take lightly. And we're at the stage, and not that it's been excusable at any point, but we're certainly at the stage in the series and in the playoffs that, or in the season, that you absolutely have to take every
Yeah.
game completely serious. And hopefully the foot stays on the gas. We see that coming out, and we'll see what happens this series.
Yeah, it looks like they, last night was definitely a good step in the right direction for them. And listening to them talk about it after the game between Harden and Tobias saying, we're not going back to Philly for a game 7. We couldn't do that. I think it's a good mindset right now. I think they're in a good spot, and I don't know. I hope I'm sure they're as amped, probably much more so, to get moving on this series. But if you're good, man, I don't know how much else do you have.
Yeah, let's end with a quick prediction.
Okay.
You want to lead off?
Hell yeah, man. I'm gonna go Sixers and 6.
Yeah, that was mine as well. Sixers and 6.
Let's
I'm gonna ride it
go,
out.
baby. I
Maybe
love
maybe
it.
maybe it's still the high of last night, and I haven't quite fully settled in. But regardless, I've said from the start I feel better about this Miami matchup than I do about Toronto. So we're through kind of the ugly Bruntworth, and now it's time to play some basketball.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're both feeling it. A little bit of that hangover, good hangover from last night. But I don't know, man. I'm feeling good about this series. I'm very optimistic, and I have been. I feel like for the most part, this postseason, I got a little bit down after Game 5, but I'm sticking with it. I think we're gonna play pretty well, and I think for now, I think we're all in a pretty good spot. So let's keep that energy moving. We'll catch you guys after Game 1 on Tuesday afternoon, like we normally do, and until then, you guys can keep up with us. You can follow Sean on Twitter at Sean_Bernard1. You can follow me at JSprint17. You can follow the pod at PickSwapPod. Check out the YouTube. Find us anywhere you get your podcasts, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else. Make sure you check out BetUS. Check the link in the bio of the YouTube and the podcast for the link, and use our code PickSwap at login for your first bet, risk-free up to $500. We appreciate you guys sticking around through the first round of the postseason and on to the next. We'll catch you guys next week.